that helps us kind of, or will help us frame our understanding of this, is if we actually think about an old framework that comes from Maslow. It's called this hierarchy of needs. Now, I think prior to the pandemic, many of us were focused, and many brands were focused on some of the higher echelons of this hierarchy of needs. You know, the top end of love and belonging and social needs, as well as self-esteem and self-actualization. And so that's, I think, where people were trying to aspire to. There was a lot of aspiration looking up the way. However, what's actually kind of happened, what the pandemic has done is basically swiped the top of the pyramid. And actually, right now, many of us are focused primarily on our, safety and security and physiological needs. You know, we feel like we've come under threat, and we're kind of like, we're defaulting back to just like very, very basic sort of like stuff, safety and survival. Now, as things are changing, I actually think that what we're starting to see an emergence into people wanting to reconnect with friends and family and loved ones and things. But that's only kind of gradual, kind of as this kind of like fear and anxiety and confusion and uncertainty still kind of lingers. And I think that's the thing that organizations need to keep in mind. They need to keep in mind that in terms of where their customers are at, if they want to deliver a better experience for them. Because the real lesson for me, as I've been observing all of this, is that we need to focus on making sure that we give our customers what they want, not what we think they need. And that's absolutely kind of key, because, other research has shown that, customers are not, the number of sales emails that are going out has gone through the roof, but also that the actual engagement with the sales emails has actually kind of fallen through the floor. However, on the opposite side is that the number of marketing emails has gone up through this kind of period, but actually engagement with those kind of marketing emails has actually increased, and it's increased conversion and and value creation and so on and so forth. And the lesson, their insight, I think, from there is that organizations need to. This is based on where their customers are at, is they've got to understand that trying to sell right now is not helpful. Actually, being helpful is the most valuable thing that you can do. So don't sell, but help. Think about how you can build and focus on building the relationship and being helpful and valuable and of worth to your customers, because that's the thing that's going to build, a platform for growth going forward. So even though that kind of companies are trying to kind of figure out a way how to get through all of this, sometimes we have to kind of go against our better, our instincts, and not think about trying to sell our way out of it. Maybe we need to think about how we help our way out of it. So that for me is a little bit of context. So, but what I wanted to do is just to run through quickly 12 things that I think that companies that lead their fields on experience do very, very well. And I've been augmenting these things over the last kind of few months based on what I think are emerging lessons that are coming out of the pandemic. And the first thing I think is that companies that lead their fields do really well is they understand the answer to this question, i.e., what is your experience strategy? I can't tell you how many times I've actually gone to different organizations and spoken to different leaders and different executives, and I've asked them this question, and they look at me slightly nonplussed, and they're like, what do you mean? Customer experience is important to us. I'm like, going, yeah, and so what? What is your experience strategy? What is it you're trying to actually deliver, and why? And they look, and then they kind of try and trot out, it's omnichannel, seamless, digital, et cetera, buzzword bingo type of stuff. And it strikes me that there's a lack of clarity here. That they're the best in their fields. They go further than this. They go further with their experience strategy, because what they also do is they also figure out how does it support the achievement of their business objectives. So they're completely tied together. They understand what they're doing and what they want to achieve with their experience, but they also understand how that kind of like helps the business achieve its own objectives, whether that's it helps them acquire more customers, whether it helps them generate better, higher spend or increase loyalty or lowers its cost to serve, and that results in kind of increased profitability. Those are the things that really matter. Those are the things that was going to make the customer experience relevant to the overall business. Those are the things that are going to deliver and turn that 70+% that I mentioned earlier into a winning number. So those are the things we've got to get right. That's one of the first things I think the leaders going to do. The second thing I think they do is that the leaders that really stand out in their field is they really get to know their customers. And what I don't mean by that is that I don't mean that they kind of collect lots of data and they make inferences about their customers. Is that they go past their data because they realize that customers are not just their data. The customers, if I ask you kind of like, does your personal kind of data kind of like describe you completely as a human being? You turn around to me and tell me, no, not at all. And I'd be like, you're absolutely right. So we need to go past the data to really get to know our customers, to really understand our customers, to really understand who they are and kind of the context in which they live in and what it is they want to try and achieve. And to do that, I think that what we're actually seeing right now, particularly through this pandemic, and as a result of the pandemic, is that empathy is absolutely key to this. To developing a better understanding of our customers, we need to try and build and become more empathetic. Now, that's not just an organizational, an individual level, that's also an organizational level. And it's something I've been talking about, is that this idea that we need to figure out a way of how do we build our empathetic musculature at an organizational level. Now, that's not going to be easy. And you're not going to be able to buy something that necessarily helps you kind of with that. Because actually, scientific studies show that kind of being empathetic and continuing to be empathetic is like building, it's hard. It's hard to do. And it's hard to do, and it's hard to do continuously kind of well, because our brains are not necessarily wired to always kind of like go that way. It becomes a habit or a skill that we have to learn over time. So that is one of the key kind of challenges in terms of how do we really get to know our customers, is how do we become more empathetic? How do we build that, as I say, empathetic musculature to help us kind of reduce the gap between us and our customers so we really kind of build kind of better relationships with them. The third thing that I wanted to highlight is that it's linked to the first one, is that the best companies, they start with the end in mind. They understand that actually we have to articulate what our experience is, and then we think about what is the data we require and what is the technology that we need to deliver that experience, and it has to be done in that order. Because what I'm seeing is many people in the industry, they start buying tech in order to kind of deliver a better experience, and I think that's the wrong way around, because actually they're not clear. As I said in the first point, they're not clear on kind of what is the experience strategy and what they want to deliver. And therefore, it feels all kind of slightly connected and a slightly Frankenstein sort of, you get a slightly Frankenstein sort of experience because they've bought all these kind of like pieces of technology to solve all these kind of problems, but they still don't have a clear idea of kind of what they want to do and why. So it's start with the end in mind, start with the experience, and then work backwards from there. And if you do that, you're not going to go far wrong. The next thing is where we get down to some of the nitty gritty, because it's not all about kind of doing sexy and new things. Actually, it's about, a lot of the time, it's about doing the basics brilliantly and doing them kind of like well and doing them consistently well. This is sometimes not very sexy work. It takes discipline and focus and commitment and time and things, but it's figuring out kind of understand what the basics are for their customers. If that means that they want to get hold of you kind of quickly and they want answers to the questions before they show up, or they want to be able to kind of find easy answers to the questions on your website, those are the things that we need to get good at. Now, we've seen people make some massive strides in this over the last few months. A friend of mine sent me a message, and it was talking about this idea of, I can't believe how much punk CX I've seen going on in the last few months. The idea that things that would normally take months, if not years, are happening in days and weeks rather than actually the longer period of time. So figure out what the basics are for your customers and make sure that you're brilliant at them. And that includes how you communicate with them. here's the thing that is emerged in the pandemic is that, communication has been absolutely key, particularly when we think about the levels of anxiety and confusion and uncertainty which is in the minds of our customers. Is we have to keep them informed. And so we have to communicate. We have to do it a lot. Do it more than you think you need to. Make sure it's open and honest. Don't make assumptions that people will always have seen kind of what you've kind of done or you've said or you've kind of, what you've written about. So eliminate the likelihood that people will have missed it by keeping communication. It's not about just doing it once. It's about making sure that people kind of understand where you're at all of the time. The next thing they do is they are relentless in their pursuit of removing little irritations in their customers' experience. This is a picture I love about a lady that is wrestling to try and get one of the plastic packaging, trying to get into the energy saving kind of light bulb that she's just bought. If anybody's kind of like, I've had that experience myself. That's why I love this kind of picture. And the only thing that I remember about buying one of those light bulbs is the wrestle that I had with the packaging. For me, that's grit. That's not supposed to be the point. The point of the light bulb is to get it and put it in and make sure it works and it's reliable. It's like I shouldn't be remembering, the wrestle I have with the packaging. So make sure that you build a culture that is always looking for the little improvements, because here's the thing: solving and removing lots of little irritations or bits of grit from your customer's experience. If you do that and you do it continuously and consistently, lots of little things are going to add up to big impact. But also realize that there is no kind of end to this. People talk about transformation, and I think transformation is such a useless word, because we're not transforming anything. If anything, we're just evolving, we're adapting, we're changing fast. So I like to bring in a kind of a quote from an old, like a punk song that I love from a band called Bad Religion. Their song is called No Control. And there's a quote in there that says, "There is no vestige of a beginning, no prospect of an end." Now that's an original quote from a book from the 1780s. It was written by a gentleman called James Hutton that wrote the first recognized book, I think, on geology. And what he can realize is that, like in matters of the earth, we're never finished. And therefore we have to keep going. We have to understand that things will always be changing. I think we need to kind of realize that in our own businesses as well, because it will be the most adaptable, and the ones that are the most adaptable, the most flexible, and the most tuned into their customers, those will be the ones that survive. So it's not about transformation; it's about adaptation. It's about being flexible and responsive, and being willing to kind of to change fast and to try things. On top of that, we also need to kind of know we need to try and strive for simplicity, because simplicity pays. There's an ongoing piece of research that I would encourage you to check out. It's done by a company called Siegel and Gale, based out of New York. They had this thing called the Simplicity Index, and they have actually an index in there for India as well, and a whole bunch of brands in India that show that since 2009, a stock portfolio comprised of the publicly traded simplest brands in their global top 10 has outperformed the major stock market indices by, check this out, ladies and gentlemen, 679%. That's mind-blowing numbers. That's simplicity both on the outside and also on the inside, because consumers like a simpler experience, and they're willing to pay more for a simpler experience. Also employees kind of prefer a simpler experience as well. By the way, for those do check out the Indian top 10. I'll give you a quick rundown. It's like number 1 is Google, number 2 is Amazon, number 3 is Maruti Suzuki, number 4 is Nokia, number 5 is Sony, number 6 is HP, number 7 is Make My Trip, number 8 is Philips, number 9 is Dell, and number 10 is TVS Motor. That's not the company's kind of view, that's their consumers' kind of view. Now, building on that, I mentioned the internal side of things. The next one, I think, is that we need to also make sure that if we're making this thing simpler for our customers, we also got to make it we've also got to make it simpler for our employees, but not just our employees, our direct employees, but also all those kind of people, whether it's freelancers or agencies or subcontractors that help us and that are essential to delivering that great experience. It's not good enough for us to think that, oh, we just need to focus on the customers. Actually, the employee experience matters just as much. So we need to get that right. The next thing I wanted to come on to is, I want to come on to this idea is that loyalty is absolutely key and to the success of any business and the longevity of any business. And right now, with what we're seeing with the effects of this pandemic, is loyalty is going to matter more now than ever. But ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear, loyalty is not about a program. Research shows that 90% of all loyalty is earned at or around the point of purchase or when something goes wrong. I split that up. It's about between 45 and 50% of it happens around the point of purchase. How do customers feel about that? And that, if you think psychologically, what that means is like, make me feel good about my purchase. Make it easy for me. Make me feel like I'm making the right decision. So that takes care of all of that. Now, we also know as human beings that things go wrong, and how you respond when things go wrong is absolutely essential. Now, if you think about it from a human psychology perspective, we don't like risk and uncertainty and the possibility of failure. So if somebody shows up and helps us solve those or takes those problems away or saves us, in inverted commas, we value them very, very highly. So those two things, both around the buying experience, the point of purchase, and also what we do when things go wrong, explains 90% of the loyalty of our customers. Now, linked to that is the best companies. They understand that this can't all necessarily be done by the human touch or just by technology. And what they do is they understand, as I've been saying all along, they understand the makeup of the customers. They understand what the customers want. So they're able to strike the right balance of technology and the human touch. So people get the connection and the service and the experience that they want and the desire at the right point in their journey. The next thing is that we've been talking about this for such a long time, that traditional customer service is normally reactive, i.e., when something goes wrong, then we respond. But that's no longer good enough. We've got the data and the analytics and the technology and hopefully the will to allow us to be more proactive by nature. Actually, we should have also the experience to understand what problems normally show up over time for customers. And so we need to respond. We need to be proactive by nature. We need to solve problems for customers when before they show up or as they show up, so they don't need to come to us to come looking for the solutions. Research supports that if they do that, then it drives greater perception of experience, greater loyalty, greater satisfaction, increased spend, all of those good things. But not enough organizations are doing this as a matter of course. The best that do it and get it right are the ones that stand out. Another couple of things I want to share with you. The 11th thing that people, the leaders I see do is they realize there's a big talk around personalization. I mean, to create more a personalized experience. The problem is that tends to get dominated by marketing. But I actually think we need to personalize everything about our experience. And it's not just about marketing. We need to think about personalize it in terms of how do we implement intelligent routing? How do we implement recommendations around next best actions? How do we implement proactive service that's tailored to somebody's experience? How do we implement personalized recommendations? How do we implement personalized customer success based on what a particular account needs? So we have to. It's not just about marketing. We have to personalize everything. And I think the real the real leaders, these are the things that they're striving for. And then the last thing that I wanted to share, and this is something that has emerged out of the pandemic, particularly given that many brands and organizations have had to move to a remote or distributed kind of way of working wherever possible. And I think what's actually kind of like emerged from that is that it's requiring us to really consider how we can lead and manage and supervise kind of teams and organizations. It's requiring a different type of kind of leadership, and I think here's a quote that has come from a colleague of mine, a contact of mine, a guy called Nate Brown, which I think absolutely nails it in terms of what is required. He says, the days of butts in seats, excuse my language, as both a physical reality and a management style are over. So successful contact center leaders will be those with the capability to engage a remote workforce, creating both an exceptional agent and customer experience with a decentralized team. Now, I think it captures the nature of it because it's a challenge for leaders is how can I get the best out of my kind of people if they happen to be working kind of remotely? Because I think there is a real likelihood that a lot of remote working is going to be here to stay. And we're never going to go back to completely back to normal in inverted commas, but we'll probably end up kind of implementing like a more of a hybrid approach to how we work, where there will be some remote working and some on-site, and those two populations may kind of overlap and intermingle kind of over time. I just think that the dynamics has changed over the last few months, and we've seen kind of what is possible for organizations. And that is asking some serious questions around the sort of leadership and management that is required to sustain that type of work kind of system. So in sum, I know this is a busy slide, but this is a list of all 12 of the things I was talking about, just in summary. I hope those things have given you some pointers, some insights. I hope they've also been a bit challenging as well, because this is where it's all about. Sometimes we have to be open to learn the lessons or to see what things need to kind of be done and where we're falling short. So these 12 things are like a checklist, and maybe that's the thing that you do. So you score yourself against those 12 things. See, and ask yourself truly and honestly and openly, how are we doing, and could we do better? So that's it. Just want to say thank you to you all. My name is Adrian Spinsko. These are my details. If you've got any questions about all of that sort of stuff, then kind of let me know. I am more than happy to answer any questions you have. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, the end.
Thank you, Adrian. Wonderful points made. You summed up well in those 12 points. We still have 2 minutes, so I'll take 2 quick questions. One question is, many times customers want something which they are not sure if they need it. Should their need be not understood before they are given what they want?
So I guess my question would be to that is to first of all ask, if you're uncertain, then you should go back and ask for clarity and get the customer to kind of like to explain kind of what they need and why they need it. It's a difficult kind of, it's a very general kind of question, but I think that I think our instinct is not just, it shouldn't just be to if we think the customer is possibly wrong or mistaken, or it may not be, then like I said before, we got to really get to know our customers, and that requires us to maybe step into it and go, please help me understand why you think you need this. Please tell me kind of like, and why you're going to, because doing that might not feel comfortable, right? But that's the way that we're going to get to know our customers kind of better. We have to be willing to step into these conversations and take the time to do it.
Perfect. Thanks. I think we don't have much time left. The other panelists are here, and thank you very much for joining us. And I would like to hand it over to Mr. Naval Ahuja, co-founder and director of Steam Leader. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Rohel, for moderating the session. Very insightful. I hope we still have your attention, and I'm now going to take up the next session with 2 leading experts in the OTT and Martech domain. Let me introduce the panelists I have today. I have with me Tarun Katyal, whom I'm sure a lot of you in the Indian media advertising ecosystem know. He's a media veteran of over 2 decades. Tarun Katyal is the CEO of C5. In his current role, Tarun is responsible, as you know, for steering Z5, India's largest and most comprehensive digital entertainment platform for language content towards gaining industry leadership position. As you also know, Tarun has a varied and diverse background across India's leading media companies. He was last at Big FM, where he was the founder, CEO, and CEO during his duration. He also set up Think Big, the content incubator, and the big TV channels Magic and Ganga. Tarun began his career with advertising agencies, but now, as you see, he's a content advertising tech expert. He also worked with the Star Network, where he rose to head the content and communications across the network in India. He also was instrumental in the record of accomplishment through successful shows like KBC. Apart from that, he was famous for launching Indian Fear Factors and a lot of other shows in India. Welcome, Tarun, on board. Glad you're here doing this with us. And as I mentioned, Tarun is now part of Z5, which is India's leading OTT network. I was just going through some of the stuff Z5 has been doing, and from what I understand, in the last 3-4 months, their consumption has shot up by almost 80% during the lockdown period. They made aggressive investments in Z5 ads, ad tech. They also have a partnership with Airtel and Jio Fiber. And they're also launching very soon Hyper Shorts, which is India's first ever fully homegrown short video platform. So all the best to you on that, Tarun. In addition to Tarun, what we also thought was to invite a leading Martech expert from Europe. Maciej Zawadinsky is with us. Hi, Maciej. Good to see you. Maciej is an expert
Thanks for having me.
And advertising technology and a founder of several successful companies. Maciej is also currently devoting his knowledge and skills to developing Pivot Pro, a privacy-focused analytics platform and the perfect alternate, as they say, to Google Analytics. He's also in the past led ClearCode to its position as a world-leading software house specializing in customer advertising and marketing technology. Thank you for joining us, Maciej, all the way from Poland. So thank you, gentlemen, for being part of this session. We have people tuned in already. And as has been announced already, the topic of what we are discussing today is around the collapsing web banner and third-party data while shifting ad budgets to OTT. Before I get into the detailed thought points about what's going to happen, let me ask you a very elementary question. We've seen over the last many years, Google, Facebook have had a kind of duopoly when it comes to customer attention as well as advertising money. Why don't you both of you tell our viewers, what are the 3 big reasons? Why do you think over the next 12, 18 months, this money, the advertising money, as well as consumer attention is likely to shift from that duopoly to also the third pillar, which is gaining currency very fast in India and outside India, which is the OTT ecosystem? Tarun, why don't we start with you?
So thank you, Nava, for a long introduction. I was almost embarrassed at the end of it. Thank you, Maciej, for joining us from Poland. It's really good to have you around, and I hope it isn't too early in the morning for you. So it's a good question, right? Where is digital advertising going? What is going to happen to independent publishers? What's going to happen to the big, large networks of Facebook and Google? For anybody to say that Facebook and Google are going to go away would be kind of very foolish, right? Will they reduce their influence on digital advertising? Maybe. Will other publishers come in and come in with scale? I think definitely yes. And why is that? I think for many years, the capability of segmented and targeted advertising, the capability of doing good big data, having great ad servers, digital ad servers, being able to do a great consumer profiling 360 through a good CDP, lied or was only a domain of the big tech, right? Which was Google and Facebook and a little bit of Amazon when they started their advertising program for a couple of years ago. But I think the democratization of technology and the democratization of platforms and their ability to attract users and users at scale is aligned for this paradigm to change, for this picture to shift. Platforms like ours and even others like Hotstar or many others are now over, closing to 100 million or over 100 million users with some significant amount of video consumption around some very quality content with a high amount of loyalty. And I think the picture started to change about 2 to 3 years ago when most broadcasters in India and across the world realized that they couldn't let the OTT game be secondary and be played by either syndicating content to platforms like Netflix or Amazon or putting their content on a revenue share on platforms like YouTube. But they had to control their own digital destinies. They started building their own platforms, but once they built their platforms and they started to see some very scaled up consumption, they realized that they hadn't invested enough behind analytics and ad tech. And I think the last 12 and the next 12 to 18 months will see some significant investments and building up of independent networks on the back of partners like Clearcode and others in actually getting what they deserve and owning the end-to-end ad tech pipeline for themselves.
Right. Ajay, you work very deeply in this entire audience measurement, or rather the audience journey measurement and the Martech space. What is your sense globally? Also, a lot of media, traditional legacy media companies are investing a lot in the OTT space. Disney just pulled out all their content from Netflix and has launched their own platform. What's your sense of what the future looks like?
Sure. I mean, I think I totally agree with what Tarun said. I want to add one point before I answer this question, is that the very big advantage of OTT is creating these brand experiences. Like there is no ad block, banner blindness, and ways that I will be distracted from seeing the brand message. So this is a big advantage. Where I see disadvantage and why there is so much investment into this space is that the advertising on the web or in mobile apps has been with us for decades now, and maybe for mobile apps not decades, but for web definitely decades. And the technology is very advanced today. There is a lot of attribution platforms, segmentation, and so on. We'll come to that probably why some of these platforms will no longer work with the demise of cookies, but they are very advanced compared to what's in OTT. And there is a big investment into creating these ecosystems where there is end-to-end ad buying, data, analytics, attribution for the OTT channel, because basically we are building in a matter of the last few years everything that has been created on the web for over a decade. So I see there is a big need because there is a big opportunity.
Very scaled up consumption. They realized that they hadn't invested enough behind
great experience. But we need to catch up with the technology, and some of the players like Z5 are already doing or in the process of doing that. But there's a lot of legacy players, even in the US, that are years behind, and they are starting to build this technology for the OTT. So the last few years, everything that has been created on the web for doing that. But there's a lot of legacy players, even in the US, that are years
changing. And how does the OTT system gain out of that? Give us some granularity. What do you think will happen, say, in the next 12 months? How does the balance of power kind of shift? Mm-hmm. Especially also given the fact that privacy laws are becoming very strict.
That's one point. So I think there are two things that influence that. One is the regulatory space, and not only what happened in Europe with GDPR, but also what's happening in Brazil, what's happening in India, in other countries where the privacy laws get stricter, and there is a limitation in what we can do in context of sharing the data between vendors. That's why I see that there will be a big reliance on first-party data. And some of the big publishers on web, like even New York Times, announced that they will no longer do the third-party audience selling or buy or inventory selling. It will be all based on the first-party data. And the OTT has a big advantage as by design. We know everything. Like the users are identified. They log in with their username or their telecom into the OTT platform, so they are identified. It's not like with web where we can lose the cookie when the user blocks it or changes the browser. So I think this is by design a huge advantage of OTT that we are dealing with primarily identified audiences. And that's what all other channels are going, shifting to, primarily on web where the cookies are used and they will no longer be, relevant. What I see also is that, there is more interest in the first party data, technology. So CDPs in particular, building the customer data platforms to, aggregate data across different sources that these nations have. And I think, again, OTT has a big advantage that they can do great partnerships with various players, whether they are telecoms or whether they are other internet providers or there are other partners that have data, and having identified audience helps you to match this data with the partner and enrich your audience data. And that is a matter of selling the ad inventory at a high premium price versus selling it unidentified users at a low price.
Right. So let me stay on this point about data and hop across to Tarun. Tarun, these are interrelated things. If you look at the large publishers, non-OTT publishers, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, they inherently require registration, hence their ability to mine that data because they know who exactly is using a Gmail and who's using the Facebook account. They managed to build huge, programmatic plays on top of this layer of data that they are primarily collecting directly from the users. OTT players, on the other hand, have a mixed bag. So in cases where you have subscriber data, obviously people are paying and they are kind of holding accounts. But there's a large number of users who are consuming OTT content without really, registering and giving you access to that kind of data. So how do you think OTT players over the next 12 months can overcome this, primary data deficit that currently they have? Because that also kind of means more earnings. The more the advertiser can map data, the primary data, the more his confidence in investing in the platform goes up.
So, you're right, Naval. I think OTT made a mistake when they launched, that they allowed a lot more guest users onto their platform without registering, directly with the OTT platform. So I'll tell you 2 or 3 things that OTT platforms did or shouldn't have done. One, we all allowed guest users to keep consuming video because we thought it was early stage without having compulsory or mandatory registration. 2, while doing the mandatory registration, we didn't take enough fields like age and gender and so on and so forth. 3rd, we allowed a lot more social logins on our platform, which didn't give us enough data pipeline from the social platforms like Google and Facebook. And all of this is something that we corrected over a period of time. I think you live to learn and learn to live. So to help you understand, a platform like ours now, if you watch over 5 videos without being registered, you have to go back and register. So it's mandatory registration at one level. At the second level, even if you were to come in and register through social, which is because of convenience we still allow, which is Facebook and Google, you have to enrich your profile in terms of age and gender. And it's even more important for us because increasingly government laws and regulation around content and around age and guardrails around that make it very important for us to get that data, both date of birth as well as gender for us. Then lastly, I think we've also all built a network of relationships on data partnerships to be able to enrich this first party data with other partners who have similar logins. And we work with other loyalty programs, we work with other telcos who are able to actually bring alive our data management platforms. And much like Martech was saying, we now have a fairly big investment in building a consumer data platform, where not only our first party data and registered verified users flow in, but a lot more data partners who flow in their data basis are their understanding and their consumption of the same users. And we've been able to modify those attributes and that profile in a fairly rich manner, and that investment continues to grow and grow.
So Martech, as you know, India is a unique country. To convert users into subscribers is far tougher as compared to some other parts of the world. And hence, as Tarun said, a lot of the OTT usage started as a sampling service to lure users in and keep the barrier of entry as low as possible, not even ask them for basic details. So what do you think, like Tarun was explaining, what do you think are the ways that, now that there is a substantial chunk of user base and advertisers are looking at the platforms very seriously to invest in, what are the ways in which we can sort of short circuit the process and jump over, because you can't have now suddenly millions of people registering and sharing their data overnight.
So I think like what Tarun mentioned about gated content and forcing the users after they experience the service to sign in is the way that like it's a global trend, even for non-OTT content. That's basically, how you gain the identified users. The moment you have identified users, you can do much more in context of the data. And what's most important, you can collect bits of data over time and you don't lose it. In the cookie world, like the moment that the browser clears the cookies, you are losing all the history. And here, like the moment, we don't have to collect all the data at once. We can do it very slowly. You can also build it based on the content consumption over time, how it changes. You can do a lot of analytics based on that will help us later to classify the users into audiences that will be very valuable for the advertisers.
Sorry, Naval, can I come? And I think the big advantage that OTT players bring into the country is that advertisers are used to buying on some of their key marquee shows on broadcast. But advertisers didn't know what the psychographics and what the other attributes of these users were. The same users, and a fair amount of them migrate from watching on TV to watching on OTT. You now know them, one, at an n=1 level.
That's right.
And two, you now know them far more than what you knew before, which you knew them through a panel and you knew them through a panel into age and gender and so on and so forth. But as more data flows in and as you grow to know them more and more, your ability to get those many signals into the same set of users that you were doing through broadcast now on OTT is far richer. A platform like ours, which is becoming 360-degree in terms of being a super app, we now have Hypershots coming, and Hypershots becomes almost quasi-social, right? Where you have far more many signals because there's user-generated content and people like and share and display affinity to a certain kind of users or certain kind of story or certain kind of products. And all of those signals keep enriching your first-party data, which is all verified through a single identifier.
Tell me, that's very interesting, the hyperlocals point. Tell me something. Why don't you tell us a little more bit about it, especially how do you plan to dovetail user-generated content into the existing content on the platform? How will it work, the synchronization?
So it doesn't really synchronize in that sense. It's a separate section within the app. So it's much like a super app where you have different areas. But what we thought was really that, for several years, the influencer game built this social platforms, right? And who were these influencers? These influencers were all these TV stars who are really on our shows for so many years, right? So all the 40 channels of the Z network and all the characters and actors within that actually build the entire influencer list in the country. A part of it, not all of it. And then there is Bollywood, and there is sports, and there are newscasters. And we thought that we had access to so many of these. Their fans wanted to connect to them directly, and the fans anyway came to consume their characters on our platform on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And we could extend that experience of fandom onto a Hypershots platform. Also, all our reality shows allowed regular users to become superstars or, at least celebrities of their own. And this Hypershots platform will also funnel that talent into our various reality shows and so on and so forth. So really there were three vectors that we were on. One was fandom, one was fun, and we thought that there's a lot out there that you can play with music, play with dialogues and all that. And the last was factual, and we think that there is a lot of DIY content in short form that is waiting to be done. And all of it had a great overlap with our existing audiences. And we thought that, while audiences in India find it difficult to have too many apps on their phone, largely because of low memory, low real estate on the phones, one super app could do it all for them.
Fantastic. Let me just pick up an audience question now. There's somebody who wants to know, would OTT overtake television or cinema in the next 5 years?
I think that question has been answered in many research reports, but I'm not going to. But I'm not going to put my job up.
Primarily a television company, which has been so far a television company. And it's an anonymous attendee. Let me also tell you, I can't see the name on the screen. It's an anonymous attendee.
Why don't you tell us what is Pitch Madison report saying?
Well, I mean, my sense is that in India, like it's happened with mobile telephony, it's happened so many times in media, things move on parallel tracks. So it's not like one thing takes over the other. OTT will grow at its own pace. Television penetration is still growing. A lot of companies have been very fast to pronounce the death of print, but look at regional print. It continues to grow at a healthy rate year after year. So I think a lot of learning that we have from Western markets might not be exactly replicable in India. At least for the next 5 years, television will continue to grow. Obviously, the pace of growth will be different because OTT's base is low. I was reading another report which said over the next 5 years, OTT ecosystem is expected to grow 24% compound annual rate of growth, which is significant given the fact that the advertising market in the last 4 or 5 years has grown at what? A CAGR of 11-12%, give or take. So OTT will grow at 2x. And obviously, one of the components that will fuel the growth is also subscription monies, which for television has also started coming in, if you see in the last 5-6 years, which was a very small pie, before digitization in television started. So the simple answer is, I don't think anybody can really predict whether it will overtake cinema or television. But one thing is for sure, OTT will become a very, very large pie of the entire digital ecosystem, which will be large enough. Maybe it will be equal to TV in 5 years. That is certainly a possibility. This year, from what I understand, digital itself would have reached 18,000 crores in India, which is from some $2.5 billion. But maybe because of COVID, the growth will be lesser. But in 5 years...
Yeah, but one of the segments that will grow even this year, they say even after all of this, possibly digital and digital video will possibly grow the fastest.
That's right. So let me come back to you.
So you answered this much better than me.
Oh, you... I've learned from you, Tarun. Let me hop back across to Mache. One of the things that we keep talking about, Mache, is data, privacy of data. I think that's globally a massive issue. Countries like India, how the data is going to be used. I was reading today, actually, that I think it's Germany that has disallowed Facebook. A German Supreme Court has disallowed Facebook to mine user data for selling to third parties, right? And why don't you tell us a little more? You have a better idea about what's going on there.
Sure. So I think with Facebook is very interesting case because they collect user data, actions, etc. So they have locations, almost everything that we do there. There is a lot of spending significant amount of time there. So the Supreme Court banned them from selling to third parties, but what they say, they don't sell the data, they sell advertising targeted by the data, and the data does not leave the ecosystem. So there is still, like, I think, some dispute over, like, whether they are using it, like, in my opinion, they are using it for advertising, not for the purpose of, like, serving the user the content and using the service. So they are using it for advertising purposes, and the user has to agree to that. But in their opinion, they are not sending it, they are selling advertising, right, and they are not exporting the data outside of their ecosystem. Talking a bit more broadly about privacy, yes, it gets much stricter. And I think, like, this is the good thing, like the ad tech and marketing technology space just got out of control, and we, like, the whole industry earns that they are now forced to adapt, and there will be a lot of changes regarding that. But it's not that, you know, we won't be able to track the users. We have to do it with the certain either consent or certain anonymization, so that we cannot target an individual rather than audience. But it's not that it's end of the world for ad tech companies now. Like, we see, like, even Clearco, the company I founded, sees the growth in the ad tech projects, mainly because they have to adopt, or there are new channels. There's a lot of investment into the first party space compared to the third party data that it used to be for the last decade. So yeah, I mean, not sure if you want me to elaborate on anything else in particular here.
Right. So Tarun, there's a specific question for you. This says, what kind of tools do you offer marketers to empower them to use your channel or your shows?
So what we're developing now, while we have 4 ad products, which is Ad Vault, Amplify, and we also have a big DMP called Infonomics, which we allow marketers to set up their campaigns and set up their audience segments and so on and so forth. What we now work with ClearCode is to build out an entire self-serve platform, marketers to be able to do almost everything themselves. Forget setting up audiences and campaigns, but also do biddable advertising, buy biddable advertising, and to also to be able to do optimization, waterfall analytics, and basically end-to-end optimization on their campaign. So our entire vision is that the advertiser or the advertising agency will be fully empowered in every way to be able to advertise on our platform, and it will have very low managed services or human intervention.
Right. Fantastic. We don't have time left, so I'll ask one last question, which is also very relevant to the Indian market, to both of you gentlemen. Measurement in digital has been kind of a bone of contention for the last many years, unlike the legacy media, which has, you know, third-party measurement tools run by companies like Nielsen. In India, you have a BAR for TV, you have a MRUC, which does IRS, the readership studies. Digital does not have any third-party measurement tools. Do you think the time has come, Tarun, to have third-party independent measurement tools? It will allow the industry to grow at a much faster rate. So digital, having said that, digital is far more transparent in terms of data as compared to legacy media. But do you think if we have third-party measurement at this point of time, it will help us jump the growth curve even faster?
So there is, so let me correct you here, Naval. There is no single currency that measures everybody together, but there is measurement of individual platforms, which is third party.
Right.
Okay. So on our platform, we have Oracle's Moat, which measures view-through rates. So how much of the advertising did anybody see? We also have Nielsen's DAR, which gives advertisers an ability to see who saw an advertising, which is what age, what genders, and whatever filters we decide to sell and they decide to measure. So those two parameters already exist on most good quality platforms. But I think there is a need for all platforms to come together and build a single currency. And I think that even, at IMAI, I'm trying to work with almost all platforms to see if, we can come to a consensus. There is obviously work that is happening at Bark and Ecamm. There is work that is happening at Nielsen individually. So yes, there are platforms. There is Conviva, which is also trying to do something on the smart TV side collectively. So there are lots of options and opportunities that are coming together. And I can tell you with all my experience in this space, it's not more than 18 to 24 months away. We will find a solution to something like this. Right. And people like Martech are doing a lot of this kind of work through Pivik. So let him tell us a little bit.
Achay, why don't you tell us globally how is the third-party independent data measurement being tackled? We know that Google, Facebook are not on third-party platforms.
So I mean, there are ecosystems like Google and Facebook does not let independent measurement, and there is a lot of controversy and even lawsuits because of that. What I want to point out is maybe something different. So when it comes to independent measurement on web, for example, when it comes to audiences, this space will get disrupted by the demise of cookies that we covered earlier, as well as by privacy laws, because by tracking these users, you share their information, and there needs to be some new mechanisms developed. And similarly to OTT, we have to develop some new currency and new systems, how to do it in a privacy-friendly way, and at the same time, so that we can compare apples to apples rather than have, like right now, like even with some leading platforms, you have significant differences in kinds of measurement. And that has been always the case, like with every time we go into integrating, for example, real-time bidding platforms, we see these discrepancies. We get them down quite a lot, but they are always there. And that's because like different vendors have a different, let's say, currency of how certain things are being measured. So to sum up, there are still challenges ahead to make it independent of the channel, but we'll get there. I'm sure that we'll get there globally as well.
Brilliant. We are out of time. As you know, this is a larger Martech event, and we have the next speaker already waiting. So thank you to both of you gentlemen. It's exciting, I'm sure, to be in the OTT space. It's a sunrise sector. While legacy media is looking at confronting many issues, especially during the lockdown, OTT is a sector which is likely to continue to grow at a very fast pace. But with the challenges of having technology and having more competition, one of the reports I read said India alone has 95 OTT platforms now, and growing because every month one or two new OTT platforms are launching. So with that, thank you to both of you for spending your valuable time, and we'll try and take some of the conversation offline. Thank you, Tarun. Thank you, Mche. Rohel, back to you.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Great listening to you. Now we move on to our next special segment, which is an expert talk with Adam Toporek. He is the President, CX Advisor, Chief Client Hero, CTS Service Solution. Since we are in different time zones, we recorded this session earlier in the morning today. And up next is Mr. Toporek with his special keynote on customer experience. Can we have it on screen? Welcome to Exchange for Media Martech India Bridge 1 series. We have with us Mr. Adam Toporek, President, Customer Experience Advisor, Chief Client Hero, CTS Service Solution. He's going to talk about how customer experience is changing as we enter a very challenging phase in terms of marketing, brands. And before we begin, I want to just talk about that Adam is an internationally recognized customer experience expert, a keynote speaker, and customer experience trainer. He's also the author of the very popular Customers That Stick blog and the co-host of the Crack the Customer Code podcast. And welcome, Adam, to this session that we have. I just want to begin with, tell me, how are you spending this time? I mean, everybody is talking about pandemic. How is it this phase for you?
So for me, it's interesting because I worked at home before because I was either on a plane doing trainings or doing keynote speeches, or for the most part, I worked out of my house. So I'm pretty used to that part of it. Like that wasn't a big change for me. So I was very fortunate in that way. For me, I'm reassessing how we approach the business. I'm reassessing how we scale and approach things. And I'm sure we're going to talk about how other companies are reassessing right now.
Right.
And just also working on some personal projects now, taking some time to focus on a few other things.
Right. So, I mean, the entire business model has moved online, and remote is the next big word that we are hearing from everyone. Tell me, coming from a world 90 days back, a very different world, to a world where remote, distance, socially distance, zero touch is the norm. Is it difficult for brands to create experience, the kind of engaging customer experience? Is there a shift? Is there a change? Is there a challenge?
100%. And, one of the things we've seen in the past few months is that organizations that were already in the midst of digital transformation, that were already embracing some of these ideas, they had a head start. They were already further down the road, and they're able to pivot better than organizations who didn't have those components. And it's super tough. So you just look at something like channel volume, right? So you think, let's do an airline. If we talk about an airline, and they've got all these people coming in the airport, and then all of a sudden, within a week, almost no one's in the airport, and all the representatives they have in the airport that handle all these situations, all that volume is moved to chat and email and phone, right? And now how do they shift their resources? How do they scale and take this volume that was over here and move it over here rapidly to make sure the customers serve, right? So you've got the channels are shifting, then you've got the business models shifting. So if you're a restaurant, now your entire business was set up, or the majority of your business was set up to serve people in the restaurant, and you may be back to that or you may not. But if you're back to it, it's still a smaller part of your business. Now you're doing pickup and curbside and handling 5 times the orders on the phone that you did before. So there's this challenge of simply allocating resources and the shift in the model. And then the final, to me, the big challenge, and we're going to talk about this some today, is that the emotional state, the expectations of the customer have shifted. And not only adapting to all these operational and logistical challenges about delivering experience, but adapting to that at the same time is super challenging.
Right. There's also, the kind of volume people are handling in terms of, say, you gave an example of airport or the restaurants, readjustment, for example, a quick readjustment is not possible, not from the infrastructure point of view, not from the training point of view. It's impossible to be readjusting such a short span. But do you think still businesses have done good, in terms of at least adjusting to it so far? Very agile.
Well, we have an expression here that's necessity is the mother of invention. I'm not sure if you've heard it, but people start to figure out things really quickly when they have to. That said, the performance has been all over the map. I think some organizations have done fantastic with it. I think some organizations have struggled, and part of that is, as I said before, some people were further down that road already. Right. So if you take something like Amazon, we think, okay, Amazon, this is the ultimate digital, still soft goods business, right? But they were already digitally transformed. Their business is digital, right? But they had to shift to, wait, our volume just tripled 10 times. Wait, are we going to make sure that we can't handle the volume? Are we going to have to start delaying even these people that pay us for Prime, that pay a bunch of money a year to get their items in 2 days? Are we going to have to tell those customers, hey, we're not sending sweaters out that fast? It may take 2 weeks because here's the medical necessities. Here are food and staples and all these medicines, things that they prioritize. So even they had to shift, right? And so I think it's super tough it's been challenging for some organizations to find that balance. But on the other hand, the ones that have pivoted have the word I like to use is they've accelerated. They took what they were already, the path they were already heading down, but now they're just 5x, right? 10x. They're accelerating how they go down that path.
As you mentioned earlier also, there is this longing for a human connection. I mean, no matter how much we deliver online and keep them engaged, but this human connect, that factor is always missing on the scene. How can brands kind of offer something which is fulfilling this vacuum of human disconnect that we witness right now? What is your advice to brands, to marketers in this situation?
All right. Well, thank you for that question, because that's something I was talking about before COVID happened. So I actually came up with a term years ago called signal stripping. And what that means is we're wired for each other. Just evolutionary biology. We are wired. That's why I can read facial expressions. We can read tone of voice. We can read a smile versus a frown. We have all this wiring to sort of know if somebody came out of the forest 10,000 years ago, whether they were a threat or not. Mm-hmm. But we're wired for them. And here's what happens. When we go down the channel chain, these human signals that help us understand, doesn't mean we can't have misunderstandings face to face. It happens all the time. But it's a lot less likely than in an email or in a chat. Because we don't have, I can't tell if you're smiling, or if I forget the emoji. So when we strip away these signals, the emotional connection is more distant. It's harder to maintain. Right. And one of the things organizations have to look at is, okay, to your question, how do we bridge that gap? So with that set up, there's a few ways we can do that. The one is making sure that we are trying to create an emotional experience. Mm-hmm. Okay, and a positively emotional resonant experience. So there was actually a study, I think you'll like this, Rael. There's actually a study of customers that have had a positive emotional experience versus a negative one. And the ones that had a positive emotional experience were 15 times more likely to recommend. 15 times. That's the NPS. 8 times more likely to trust. 6 times more likely to forgive. That's the power of emotional connection. So the first thing I would advise companies to do is this. Start with the word you said a little bit ago, training. Right? They've got to have empathy. We have to understand that if somebody's calling about their mortgage in the middle of COVID, if you're a bank, right, that some of those calls were already scared and negative before. Now a lot of them are going to be. They're worried about their job, their spouse's job. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about they lost their job. And having the team that's on the other end of that phone when they get that call trained to understand empathy, to understand the person and where they're coming from, is one of the best ways to create that emotional connection.
Right. I know. I agree. Online is there, but there's a limitation of the communication. For example, it's a non-verbal communication. When you are present, when you read the expressions, the aura around, I think that cannot be repeated online. Or do you think we can reach a tech stage where this can happen? Just want to add, since you know so much about this.
You mean like way in the future, like augmented reality, virtual? Yeah, I mean, I think if augmented reality gets really cool, probably it can be pretty, it'll get pretty close probably. I don't know. There's still like a energy when you're with somebody. That I don't know if that'll be replaced. But what we do know is the mind is really good at being fooled. So if virtual reality gets really good, it'll be good. Right now, this is one of the best ways, is what you and I are doing. Like, this would be an entirely different feel if we didn't have the video.
Absolutely.
Right? It adds a lot of layers. So there's a lot of operational challenges to video, bandwidth challenges, also whether the customer is set up for video. But to the extent that you can add video to replace, not replace, but to augment chat and email and phone, is powerful, right?
Absolutely. There's brands are facing another challenge, which is that one, they're going through a dip in sales, overall, so they have to deal with that part of it, and at the same time, they have to focus on their customers. So they are torn between two ends at the same time. How can brands deal with the situation better and focus on the customer while they have also the business challenge because of low sales and the growth is the business is low at the moment? What is your advice to brands in such a situation?
So I would say this, they're all one thing. It's easy to separate them, but they're sort of all one thing because if you're dealing with resource good, to me, I'm one of the few people that you'll in CX that'll say this. The great majority of customer experience challenges are resource challenges. If I had an unlimited budget and unlimited staff, do you know how good my customer experience would be? You know, in the end, it's a question of where do you put resources, how do you allocate resources. So one of the things I look at, if you're in a situation where your business is shrinking, your industry got hit. My industry got hit, training and keynote speaking. I'm not on stages right now, right? One of the things is do what's called an 80-20, right? And that's, I don't know if you know that principle. It's the idea that, 20% for the listeners, 20% of your inputs create 80% of your results. 20% of your customers create 80% of your sales. 20% of your customers create 80% of your headaches, etc. Right? Focus on the 20. Figure out the vital few inputs that really matter the most. Even if you can't staff all your channels, so which ones are the most important? Right. Which hours are the most important? Right. If you have to, which customers are the most important? Right. Which touch points are the most important? When you're constrained, you've got to maximize the impact of what you can do. Mm-hmm. And approaching it that way, whether it's channels, touch points, staffing, training, budget, whatever it is, trying to figure out where you're going to get the most bang for your investment, for your focus in the experience is the best way to approach when you have we always had limited resources, but when you have more limited resources than before, that's my best advice.
Perfect. There's another issue which is happening that in this, we are well over 90 days into the situation and habits have been formed. There's a certain mindset that is getting set for marketers, for brands, for customers and everybody else. Tell me, this phase, which is going to last for some more time as people say till we find the vaccine, how would it impact the long-term engagement with customers? Would it create its own impression on the way we deal with customers, the brands deal with customers, or the customers deal with brands? How do you see that impact being created?
Well, I'd say 100% that's true. Now, it is going to differ by industry. Different industries have been affected different ways, right? For Amazon, it's sort of a short-term challenge, and they've grabbed more market share than they probably planned on. I always joke Amazon's executing their 10-year plan in 3 years right now, right? Just owning more of the pie. But if you are a restaurant, right, you are car rental, if you are hotels, like all these things, there's going to be a lot of shifts, and some of those are going to, in some cases, buying patterns have permanently changed, I would say, right? So here's an example. Somebody was talking to a customer about this. It's like a big home improvement store, and they could never really get like curbside pickup as a thing. Like there's never any buy-in for it, right? Now, huge focus. Big shift, right? Something that couldn't get off the ground. So you're going to see that internally in organizations. If you look at like a restaurant, all right, let's do that. They're going to go back to full capacity? Maybe not. Until one of the biggest restaurateurs in New York, Danny Meyer, said he may not open until there's a vaccine because he doesn't know if he can run his businesses half full. He doesn't know if the margins are going to be there to cover the expenses. And one of the big things, I'll just keep with the restaurant, is because it's a good example, because it's one that's really changed. For a lot of restaurants, particularly ones in like nice areas in Manhattan, things, their profit's at the bar. Like the food pays the bills, and then the profit's at the bar. Well, what's the bar look like right now, right? So I think you're going to see a lot of adaptation. Absolutely, there's going to be major changes, but it's going to depend on the industry, and it's going to depend on what happens next, right? Do we have a vaccine in 3 months? Do we have one in a year and a half? Right. What does the vaccine mean? How effective is it? So it's a lot of change, but some of it will be permanent, and organizations need to start anticipating and trying to understand what the future looks like in their industry particularly.
Right. I'll come to my last question, but I have one quick question. A lot of brands and marketers are waiting for the vaccine to be, just kind of discovered, a solution to be discovered to this problem. Tell me, Is that the right strategy to wait for it, or should you let your business strategy be agile and get into a new kind of, open up and look for some solutions quickly, even though the vaccine is not there? What is the best approach that you think at the moment marketers and brand owners can take?
I would say that's a complicated question. So I will say, number one, I am not a medical doctor. I'm a customer experience expert. So we'll just add that in. But with the vaccine, there's not a lot of certainty what that looks like. Right? I mean, right now we have flu vaccines, but we never know what strain of flu it is.
Right.
Every year, right? So we don't know what the vaccine is going to really mean, even when we have one. That said, I mentioned Danny Meyer, the comment he had made. I think that, to me, you should be looking for what you can do. You can't just wait on a lightning bolt out of the sky. Now, if you can't think anything, maybe you are waiting, but you shouldn't be waiting because you think that's the way to. I'm waiting for things to go back. You should be adapting now because you don't know if it's going to go back. You should be figuring out what you can do. A lot of restaurants are doing that, right? They're doing curbside pickup. They don't have in restaurant dining now. They've pivoted that way. Now they probably aren't at full staff. It's not good. It's not as good, but they're keeping the doors open and they're creating revenue, creating profit. So I believe in taking control of your destiny, whether you're a person or a company, to the extent that you can. And I don't think you should just wait around.
Right.
You should be looking. If you don't find anything, that's one thing, but at least you looked. You tried.
Perfect. Well said. My final question is about, as an expert, customer experience expert, what are the broad trends that you foresee emerging from here on as we move?
A few. Number one, the thing we just talked about at the individual level, I think that is one of the biggest ones, is uncertainty. Organizations have to adapt to the idea that there are no 3-year plans right now. they're gone. They don't exist. There's no such thing. I mean, maybe depending on your industry, if you're in manufacturing, but big picture for a lot of industries, there is no 3-year plan. You're lucky if you have a 3-month plan. Right, so you've got to have a short cycle that's based on flexibility. That's based on, before a lot of organizations said, "Oh my God, who could have seen this coming?" Okay, fair enough. But what about now? Now we know. Okay, it may come back. It may do this. It may do this. There's sort of these different pathways it could go. Do you have a plan for each of those?
Right.
So planning for uncertainty, embracing that as part of your strategic planning is huge. Next thing is, we've been talking about this already, is greater digital integration and transformation. All right, I use the word integration to talk about that connection between the human and the digital. So it's important to me to talk about it as integrated as opposed to transformed. But it doesn't matter. It's the same thing in the end. And that part of it, figuring out how you're going to transform, how you're going to use digital to make up whatever way that is for your industry and your business model, how you can use that. For example, if you had online ordering before or something like that, right? Or you had online shopping. Well, now do you have it in a way that integrates with the new in-store method? Okay, you're using the app to communicate with customers about whatever, how far distant they have to be, all the cleaning things you're doing, all the safety protocols, that they have to wear a mask, whatever it may be in your situation. Are you using the technology to keep up with the times? Right. And then finally, I think one of the last things I'd say is really trying to understand that the psyche of your customer has changed. We alluded to this earlier. I think the customer has changed now. The customer is more scared, more concerned, more uncertain. And if you as a company, as an organization can be a rock for them, can be something they can rely on, something they can have faith on, something that they know is there for them. You talked about that emotional connection. Well, part of that emotional connection is I can rely on you. You're not going to take advantage of me because I lost my job. You're not going to take advantage of me because you have the last supply of Clorox, whatever it is. That there's a huge opportunity to right now. It's bad how we got there, but there's a huge opportunity for organizations to prove how much they care about their customers at this time.
Right. Thank you so much. Lovely, great insights. It's been an insightful discussion, and hopefully next time when the world opens up again, we hope to see you in India talking to us one-on-one. I would love to do this session offline, someday. Thank you so much for talking to us and to Exchange for Media. Look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Well, thank you, Rahel. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Adam. Fantastic sessions, both of you. We now move on to the last session for the day. We have with us Rahul Garg, CEO of Moglix, and he will be presenting a success story on entrepreneurship and leadership in the times of COVID. Just to give a little brief about Rahul. Rahul has extensive experience in strategy, product management, and operations in the technology space. Prior to founding Moglix in April 2015, Rahul headed advertising strategy for Google Asia, where he built a $2 billion business from scratch. He started his career with ATM Systems, a Bangalore-based startup where he led the wireless LAN satellite receiver algorithms team and developed a knack for building world-class products. He has also serviced as chairperson of the Marketing and Ad Tech Committee at IAB Singapore. Companies like Cognizant Systems and Freescale Semiconductors also form a significant part of his journey in the technology industry. Rahul is also an investor, having invested in more than 7 startup ventures. He has also made a global presence and holds about 16 US patents in the form of product management and technology, and has contributed to 5 publications of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO. Rahul, we are very happy that you're here. Over to you.
Thank you, Sonakshi. I think I am not able to start my video. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Fantastic to be present in the new normal with all my, I would say the marketing fraternity. I refer typically as my fraternity because having spent 5 years at Google, I pretty much was part of the marketing and advertising revolution and going from offline marketing to online as a primary channel of marketing in those days. So very excited to be back and share my experiences in a different context of building a company, building a brand over the last 5 years. And this is still early days of our journey. So we continue to build a company which is disrupting B2B commerce in India. So let me try to get the screen projection. Okay, so Nakshi, just confirming that people will be able to see my slide.
Yes, they can.
Okay, fantastic. So the topic I was given today was talk about my experiences in building Moglix, and then also speak a little bit about how the COVID has impacted broadly the startup ecosystem, as well as what Moglix is doing in these times, which are unprecedented and fairly chaotic for all of us globally. So if you look at the step 1, which is about starting Moglix, we started with a very simple goal. And having worked with many of the consumer commerce companies, consumer brands, you talk about CPG brands being built, you talk about travel, e-commerce brands being built in the consumer segment. One of the areas that intrigued me was how does this play out when you start to look at business-to-business transactions happening in a country like India, where you can guess from this picture that is being projected, this is the distribution ecosystem of India. This is a picture, live picture from a place called Chandni Chowk in Delhi, the old part of Delhi, which continues to act as the go-to destination for all wholesale product buying in India. And this acts as the feeder to all the subsequent dealers, retailers in the offline world or to the manufacturing sector of the country pre-Moglix. And I think this was astonishing for me to see that having gone through independence and 50, 60 plus years of those, we are still in the world where we are getting companies like Flipkart, companies like Ola, companies like Swiggy, delivering fantastic consumer experiences as a consumer using asking for products or for services or food. The businesses continue to buy from this old school distribution world, which does not have an effective storefront or an online storefront, so to say, does not have effective supply chain or ways to get the products from their shop to the manufacturing industry, or does not have an efficient financial system to support, how will they work with manufacturing organization and support the working capital needs that are inherent to any B2B transaction? And that is what we set out to disrupt back in 2015. This is all pre-GST times, where India was a federation of multiple states having their own taxation structure, which made it even more complex than what we see it today. So with this simple goal, how do we take this old school experience into a digital journey? That was a challenge in front of us. How do we make the manufacturing companies, whether they are automotive companies like Hero Honda, companies like Maruti, their ancillaries, or companies like Tata Steel, or companies like Unilever, which have gone through a fair bit of digital journey in their marketing and sales departments, how do they start to think of this in their procurement and supply chain? Also, on the supply side, if you look at it, you have to convince them to come online, to start cataloging their products, to start to make the entire pricing as a more transparent versus something which happens on a one-to-one basis as a non-transparent pricing mechanism. So these are the things you had to change for a company like Moglix to be successful, and those were behaviors changing on the buyer side, on the supplier side, also building the entire infrastructure of transportation, warehousing, because the old school distribution pretty much relied on something like a rickshaw, something like a what they call as the chota hati, where you have the Tata Ace kind of products, and sometimes a guy is traveling on bus delivering products. I mean, all kinds of crazy ways in which the products were getting delivered pre-Moglix. And we said, this sounds like a pretty interesting problem, interesting, large, and broken. And we will bring technology into this world. We will work tirelessly on educating many of these guys. Just like back in 2010, I was educating many of the advertisers to start taking online advertising seriously. I said, this is the next opportunity for me to start educating buyers and suppliers into this direction. And today, where we stand, I mean, 5 years into it, we have more than 500,000 plus SKUs across 45 categories that we supply. These are categories across safety products, across electrical products, across bearings, many of the industrial categories some of you may or may not be familiar with. But this is a very large assortment of products that we deliver today. We work with suppliers and customers across multiple brands that you must be familiar with. Whether it is on the supply side, I can think of companies like Havells, I can think of companies like Siemens, SKF, all of these companies working with us. And on the customer side, you name any industry, whether it is FMCG company like Unilever, GSK, or companies in electrical domain, or companies in pharmaceutical, some of the interesting pharmaceutical companies which are also working on COVID vaccines and medicines during this time. All of these companies are now getting powered by Moglix in one way or the other. And therefore, it becomes a very, very interesting journey of taking through covering completely non-digital experience to a digital organized experience that we have been building. We are present in now 20 plus cities across the country, from where we cover pretty much most pin codes across the country which are relevant, more than 25,000 pin codes we cover on a monthly basis through these locations, and with 700 plus people working with 1,000 plus manufacturing organizations, delivering a consistent experience on a daily basis. What has been the disruption due to COVID? If you look at whatever I talked about so far, I mean, there are multiple elements to it. So the first element of the supply base, and many of you would realize that during the lockdown and even in the unlock era that we are today, many of the physical markets would literally went offline. They were not operating, shutters were down, and the entire distribution ecosystem was disrupted. The second thing that happened was many of the manufacturing plants were shut down or started to operate with a lot of safety precaution and if they were allowed to operate. Third, I mean, you had to figure out how do you operate your warehouses when the entire country is in lockdown, because you have, and this is a picture live from one of our warehouses back in April, when we had to figure out how do we maintain social distance and continue to operate our warehouses in an effective manner. And last, given the space that we are in, pretty much in the essential services, because we are dealing in safety products, some of the medical supplies, so on and so forth, there is some things we can do work from home, but there are some things which would require us to come to office. Otherwise, we would not be effective or efficient. And how do you design protocols of working effective both on the work from home and work from office in an effective manner? And I would be proud to say that we have almost every single of our offices today working, and even Mumbai, which is one of the most sort of impacted areas. I mean, this week, some of our brave people at Moglix have started to come on and off to office as well, while the warehouse has been working all through. And so is the case in Delhi and so on and so forth. And that is how the India keeps running, because if we stop, I mean, there will be another massive set of supply chain disruptions, just like what you see in food and medical, if those companies or those supply chains stopped working during lockdown. Now, it meant also the change of products that we were dealing with. I mean, suddenly from selling a lot of electrical and bearings, we were getting into product categories which were becoming more and more prominent, and one had to come up with innovations in all of these products. So you would find there are hundreds of products that we have worked with during this time and continue to sort of innovate on how do we make them more effective. One of those innovations is how do you get a reusable washable mask which is still protective enough, and it's not like a cloth stuff that you literally get and which provides you semi-protection, not the entire protection. But how do you design for that, and how do you get the materials, and how do you get the right manufacturing done? Those are kind of the innovations that we have been partnering on the in this time. We also have had very interesting case studies where one of the largest FMCG company globally, $50 billion plus FMCG company, they had a unique challenge where they needed many of the personal protection products across the world, and they looked up to us and said, can you support this supply chain across the world for us? And we were able to export from India more than 20 countries. And today I feel proud to a certain extent that we have impacted more than 10 million people directly or indirectly by supporting medical supplies for them globally. Second, I mean, Vande Mataram mission, we have been an integral part of supporting our pilots, air hostesses on getting them personal protection equipment. It is not today when probably it is a lot easier to solve for this problem, but back in April and May when this was even harder to get some of these reliable products delivered to them, we have been part and parcel of making that happen. There is also a very important people dimension that happens during this time, and many of you would face it. How do you keep your organization, which is in essential services, continue to operate effectively? Because yes, people are suffering from certain amount of fear. They have to also step up. we have to do the right thing, which is spanning across multiple stakeholders, whether it is employees, customers, investors, the entire ecosystem of manufacturing companies that you work with. How do you continue to be active and making sure that you are taking decisions as a leader, covering what needs to be done across multiple of these stakeholders and interacting on a very high frequency with each one of these in a manner which is unprecedented virtually through them across the world. Also, we have continued to, we have always been about how do we disrupt and change the manufacturing and supply chain for the country. But this time also introduce a new paradigm for us. How do we play a role in one of the greatest challenges the society has faced over the last century? And can we be an effective partner, whether it is to the governments, to the health workers, to the people in police, people in government, and making sure that we are able to supply many of these products and get our supply chain to reach the last level of person who may need some of these products in an effective manner. And last, I think to summarize, I think we continue to believe in a mission where we would change the supply chain and the way the manufacturing ecosystem of the country looks like over the next coming years in a significant manner. But this COVID scenario has also given us an opportunity to play a role in a broader society objective of how do we come together and make sure that the supply chain is built to get the health products out to the last leg of the country where these would be required the most. And doing this, we continue to keep all the key stakeholders, including every single Mowgli who is working with us, customers, suppliers, and the broader ecosystem as part of this journey. I will pause here. I think there is a slot, I believe, for Q&As. So
thank you.
Over to you, Sonakshi. Yeah.
Hi, Rahul. This is Rohel here, Sonakshi's co-moderator. So wonderful listening to this session. There are some questions that I would like to ask you that we have got from the audience. First question is, what does your Martech stack look like?
What does my Martech stack look like? Actually, so it is interesting because I was heading advertising exchange for a while, and also early days of DBM, Invite Media, many of these stack products. So today we are working heavily on analytics. We use, I don't know whether it's appropriate to share the brand names, but I think there are two companies which are strongest in analytics. So we have worked with both of them, and now we have a preference towards one of them. So that is one element of the key product that we continuously focus on. We focus on a lot of advertising stack products. So I'm taking it broader to not just limiting to marketing, but also the advertising stack we use. So we also broad base and work across the likes of optimization platforms across Google and the Facebook and social media tools, whether it is all the way from online reputation management on social media, all the way to performance marketing on a Google kind of platforms. We also effectively have started to go more and more deeper into audience-based and marketing approaches, which are prominent, more so I would say in our mobile stack, where it's a big focus, mobile app, and as all of us know, India, while consumers were always on mobile app, but we start to see businesses moving to mobile app as well, quite significant for the last 1 year. So there are a lot of tools that we are engaged in that direction and continue to use them effectively.
Right. There's another Another question by Sanjay Sinha. How do you market yourself in terms of your brand and acquire new customers?
So we work with typically large manufacturing houses. So we do follow sales structures as well as you would do in enterprise sales organizations. So a lot of our therefore the marketing and go-to-market is tailored towards enterprise marketing approach, where we would use quite a few classical approaches of email marketing and efficient tools around it. We would use inside sales. We would use lead generation platforms combined with an effective enterprise sales strategies that are part of most organizations.
Okay. So in your presentation, you made an interesting point about empathy in marketing, and especially during this time, what we have seen in the last 90 days. I think brands are finding it difficult to sell directly. There has to be a factor. This empathy has to be the tone of the marketing communication. Tell me what is your advice to people to inbuilt it in their market stack, Martech stack, in the stack? How can they enable it?
So I would say, and I'm a big believer in brand building and articulating what you stand for. So I feel Marcom is an extension of what you really believe truly as a brand. Today, people can see through it. You can't sort of fake it. So at least for us, what we found is we pretty much fell right in the middle of essential services with the PPE and safety. Right. And we said, what do we want to do as an organization? And which in today's time is a combination of what we want to do for our employees, the society, and the ecosystem. Once you decide that, I think it becomes far easier, because then all you are doing is you are making sure, if you want to drive a higher impact, that the same message reaches to the right audience. So when we are distributing masks to all hospitals on the Moglix balance sheet across police and health workers, I mean, we had to use, for example, Twitter as a marketing approach. And we said maybe that's the most efficient channel to get that message out, because it's not something that we are really advertising. We want to be organic about it, because this is something that we believe in and what we should be doing. Because by April 1st, one had realized that there were a lot of policemen and doctors who didn't have masks. And we were like, we will make sure that quite a few of them at least get the first supply of masks subsidized by us, pretty much given for free. And that's what we want to stand for as a brand. So I think if you believe and if you have actions backing it, you have to use the right media channel to amplify the action. Don't force fit a message if you're not going to follow it through the action, because people take it, it actually works reverse in these times. If you don't take action, but you're just sort of playing to empathy for the sake of it. Okay, Rohil, is there another question?
No, that's it. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful keynote. I mean, a lot of learnings from here, and we expect to hear more from you as in the coming time as well. So I will request Sonakshi to come and announce we have the 4th day tomorrow, which has an exciting lineup as well, and she's going to give a brief about tomorrow's session that we have from 3 to 5 p.m. where people can join us and what the experts talk about Martech. Over to you, Sonakshi.
Thank you, Rahul. Fantastic session, highly technical. We need to be a lot more smarter to understand certain things in this aspect, but I'm sure we'll get there one day. We are ending the session for today, and I thank all my audience for being extremely supportive, and thank you for being there till the end, and I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as we did. Tomorrow's session is the last, which is day 4 of Martech India Brit series. We concluded with having Scott Brinker as one of the keynotes. So please do stay tuned. He is the godfather of Martech, and we could not end on a better note. So I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you once again, all those speakers for today, and look forward to a fantastic series tomorrow as well. Thank you and good night. Bye.
Thank you.